Thanks, Nanette. So I'm really glad to be here today. And what I'm going to talk about is some academic research that I and my colleagues have done. The title is Inside the Creative Process, Shifting the Advertising Appeal from Functional to Emotional. Now, what we're focused on is insight, and specifically how consumer insight supports the leap to a creative idea. So how does insight work in the creative process? There's lots of different ideas. The first one that we're going to go over is insight a critical component to the creative brief? Now, if you work in advertising for a while, we all really put insight on a pedestal. It's something that's incredibly important, hard to do good creative work without it. Well, at least if you're an account planning type like me. So that's one approach. Now, why is insight going to be that important? Creatives don't like to tell stories about unique selling points. All right. So if you've got a particular product category, let's say it's some kind of automotive category, it's really easy to become overwhelmed with the kind of technical features of the product and actually tell something other than about, oh, it's got this much more power or this much more of some other feature. Okay. In this kind of a way, insight gives creatives license to tell emotional narratives about people in the context of products. So instead of telling a story that's just describing the car in some way, shape, or form, you're somehow or another getting and tapping into the emotion that surrounds the car, and therefore can tell a much more appealing and persuasive story. Okay, so, but that's the way that we kind of think in the ad business insight's supposed to work. But there's another particular way, and this one falls back on a long tradition of research and creativity outside the advertising area. So the other alternative is insight just another priming cue? So that if you're doing some kind of creative thinking, priming cues are often very bad. It's not stuff you want to do, all right? So the information given to a creative leads to something called functional fixation. Okay, functional fixation. You become focused on the insight, and it just becomes overwhelming, and it's actually hard to get things out of your head. It's sort of like you've heard stories about try to suppress thinking about the white elephant. Okay, it's actually pretty hard to keep suppressing the white elephant, and that's exactly the way insight tends to happen. It fixates you, and even though you think that you're sort of not doing it, you really are. Okay, so insight, therefore, gets literally applied and parroted back in the creative idea. That's the way that sort of the psychologists who study creativity will often say. Okay, now, overall, that's not necessarily a bad thing, okay, because the creative work might be on strategy, okay, and it really highlights the strategy, but it may not be original. So which of these things is it? Is it the way we think about it in advertising, or is it instead sort of the way that psychologists who study creativity often think about this? So that's the question, okay? So let's go to the next slide, please. So we did a study, okay? We had 60 creative professionals. They were all based in Sydney, and they responded to a hypothetical brief. We wrote what we felt was a very typical brief for the automotive category, and they all were supplied with that. Each creative produced one video ad and one print ad, okay? So that's it. They each had to produce 2 different ads, one print, one video. There were 3 conditions with 20 creatives each. There was the strong insight condition where they were given the hypothetical brief plus the strong insight. Then there was the weak insight condition. They were given the same brief, but they were given a weak insight. And then the no insight control. All they had was the brief. Now, more study details. The brief supplied to the creative went over the following. It was a truck, okay? In Australian ease, it is called a ute. So we called it a ute. Ute is short for utility vehicle. The target market was tradesmen or farmers. So, and blue collar workers aged between 25 and 45. We had a proposition in there, no harder working utility. Okay, we had a number of reasons to believe that were listed, that the ute had 10% more power than competitors, 15% larger scratch-resistant tray top, rust-resistant antibody, all-wheel drive. So again, a few technical features of the product. And then once the creatives did all their work, we had these things evaluated by two external coders, okay? One was an art director and the other was a creative director. So they went through, assessed all of these different ideas that they had, came up with some views separately, and then we compared them, and lo and behold, the views matched incredibly well. So we have this objective outside view of whether or not these ideas can be characterized in different ways. All right. You might be asking, what do we use for insights? We had obviously a strong one and a weak one. Okay, so what's an insight? Now, this is the working definition that we used. It's a fact with attention that's original for the category. So it has to somehow or another be based in a fact. Okay, it has to have some kind of attention, a yes, but, or something like that that goes with it. And it can't have been used in the category before. All right. Now, we started off with a list of 9 insights. We started pulling out all our mates who are account planners saying, look, can you come up with some good insights with regards to the Ute category? All right. So we started collecting a bunch of good insights. Okay. We came up with a list of 9. These were evaluated by 20 account planners who then went through and rated these insights on, I think, about a half a dozen different measures. Okay. Now, the strong insight dominated on every single measure. It was considered definitely strong, and everybody looked at it and said, yep, this one's really good. And then there was another one which was, this isn't great, okay? And it rated the lowest on each of these half a dozen measures, okay? So the strong insight was this: for tradesmen and farmers, their vehicle was a point of pride, like scars that prove one's toughness. Okay, so it's the scars kind of, it's still got a little bit of tension in there. Okay, so it's a point of pride, scars that prove toughness. There we go. Okay, so the weak insight, okay, was men do hard work. That's it. Okay, so that wasn't particularly loved by the 20 account planners who looked at this. And here's the final results. One of the things that the way went and measured was how emotional the work was and how functional the work was. Now, where there was no insight given, the work ended up in the lower right. Okay, now you see a center of a dot, and the red line is the 95% confidence interval. So no insight, stuff ended up very functional, but not very emotional. But both of the insights moved the work to being much more emotional, but at the same time, it was less functional. Now, the strong insight clearly worked better. That was the green line, or the dot with the green line around it, the 95% confidence interval. So it clearly was the most efficient in moving the work towards something that was much more emotional. Okay, so it got them into that zone of being emotional. The weak insight, it still did the same kind of job, but it just didn't do it as well. Okay, so it was more emotional, but lost a lot more functionality. Just a quick one, did the creatives just play back the insight? We asked a few questions of the judges, and we asked them whether or not there was a human truth, that whether or not the ad was based on human truth. They didn't know what it was, but whether or not there was a human truth, whether or not there was a consumer insight, and very clearly, whether it was a strong, weak, or no insight, the judges could tell the difference. They could sit there and point out, yes, these were based on a strong insight. Oh, these were based on no insight. Very clear. But when we asked the judges, was it based on the insight? We gave them a bunch of insights, by the way, so that just to make sure they didn't know what the insight was. Was it based on the scars or pride insight? And they really couldn't tell the difference. Okay. Was it based on the hard work insight? Again, they couldn't tell. Okay. So it wasn't like they were just playing back the insight. The creatives were doing something more with it. So let's summarize. What we were able to show is that insight shifts work from more functional to more emotional. However, observers can tell the work is based on an insight, especially a strong one. It's clear to them. Okay. However, it's not like there's a breadcrumb trail back into the insight. It's not just a literal articulation of the insight. It's something bigger. It's something wider. So future research. The most useful insights were emotive ones. Now, is that because we didn't have meaty enough functional insights? Now, that's been something we've been talking about, is like, can we come up with meaty functional insights? Okay. Further, can we add emotion to the more functional insights? Is it just sort of like we tweak the insight a little bit, okay, and do it that way? Now, the category was functionally oriented. We admit that. That's one of the reasons why we chose that category. If we used an emotionally dominant category, would functional insights work better? All right. Lastly, we need a better understanding of the range of insights used. Yeah, we used 9. Okay, we were trying to come up with more. Can we characterize insights in more useful ways? So again, thank you very much. I'm Scott. The author team also thanks you, John, Lawrence, and Alex. Thanks, guys.